Ultimately, all you need to sew is fabric, thread, a needle, scissors, and a heck of a lot of gumption. Hi, welcome back. This week we're going to talk about how to get into historical costuming, cosplay, or just sewing in general if you have no experience and don't have much money either. Or as I like to think of it, broke and clueless. Since I've just gotten back into sewing and gotten into historical costuming for the first time over the past year, I've learned a lot about how you can sew on a budget and how you can learn if you haven't encountered a lot of these concepts before. So I want to give you some of the tips that I use, but I'll break it down into a few categories. First, I want to start off with mindset, because that is one of the hardest things to combat if you're new at something, especially something as intimidating as historical costuming and sewing. Then I'll break down some tips for how to sew on a budget, finding materials, getting playful, and then lastly, I'll give you a few tips about how to use patterns and how to get started if you're not sure what you're doing. When you're just getting started with sewing or just getting back into it, it can be really intimidating. Especially with more complicated areas like historical costuming or cosplay, it can seem super overwhelming, and with the amazing talent you see here on YouTube and on social media, it's incredibly easy to get in your head and think, I will never ever be as good as them, so why try? The only reason people ever get good is by failing, and trust me, as a perfectionist, that is a lesson that I never wanted to learn. Honestly, without failing a ton, I wouldn't have achieved everything that I have. If you just think of it in the sense that you would be so much happier to have an imperfect outfit that you've always wanted, you know, to imperfectly live your period drama or TV show or whatever dreams, let that guide you in the beginning of your journey, because that can be a pretty powerful motivator. I try on this channel to show how many struggles I go through. Some of them get cut out because they're redundant or because I just didn't catch them on camera because I was way too frustrated with the project, but I try to let everyone know how much I struggle with everything, to know that it's totally normal for you to struggle too. Whenever I talk to creators, regardless of what their medium, I always hear the same thing, and something that I feel as well, the worry about imposter syndrome. Everybody gets frustrated because they have the ideal of their project in their head, and sometimes it's really hard to make that a reality. And it's hard to accept that done is better than perfect, and sometimes good enough is so much better than having nothing. So the more you can embrace that and just take wild joy in the imperfection of whatever you're making, the more likely you are to keep making stuff and get good enough to make stuff as perfect as you envision. You learn with every failure, and the skills within sewing and within creativity in general, they stack up. So the more failures you get, the closer you're getting to your goals. You love failure? You love failure. Failure is Jill being approved. Just know that if you're experiencing imposter syndrome and a huge fear of failure, then you've joined the club. It's a big club, it's a great club, welcome. So recently there's been a lot of discussion in the historical costuming community, which has rightfully needed to be had. It's been led by people like Bianca Hernandez, who has the channel Book Hoarding, and like Altheish. I'm sorry if I'm saying that name incorrectly, I've only ever read it. Muse and Dionysus is another channel I would refer you to. There's a ton of great creators who have touched on this and other important topics. There are some struggles within the historical costuming community. Some people want it for the exact historical accuracy. I would call that historical dress, because there is a very research-based aspect to it where you want to have the right materials. Often it's done for historical interpretation, so you're trying to show people, usually in a teaching sort of setting, what the past was like, what our material culture and what our history is. And in order to do that, and in a lot of cases in order to do that safely, you need to have the natural fibers that were available at the time. And if you're doing historical dress, then you want to be using the exact methods, the exact materials, because you're trying to bring the past to life. I appreciate everything they do. They do incredible work. I love history. I would love to be Ruth Goodman. But in the historical costuming space, that is basically the merger of historical dress and cosplay. They overlap. There's a joy towards the historical, but for a lot of people, unlike in historical dress, this isn't your main career. You're not necessarily a historian or someone who's got an incredible amount of sewing skill yet. It's something you want to develop and it's something you want to learn about, but if you don't have it, then you can't draw from it perfectly from the beginning. There's going to be a lot of missteps and a lot of learning along the way. So that's where historical costuming, at least in my mind, comes into play. It is the group of people who want everything on a very large spectrum, from as much historical accuracy as they can get, sometimes using modern materials, to basically, I just want to cosplay a period drama and I don't care how I get there as long as I get there. I probably fall a little bit more in this camp, although I do try with every project to learn a historical aspect about it, to learn more about the material culture and the history and the construction methods, and do things that bring me closer to history, because I do love it, but I don't have a background in it, so it's just a side passion that I do in addition to all the other things I have to do. It is a luxury to have enough time, money, education to really go all out and have this knowledge. And for some people, they really had to give up a lot to get there, and that's completely admirable. But we can't hold ourselves all to the same standards. You have to reach what's available to you. It's important that we make this community as accessible and diverse as it can get, because the more points of view and various interpretations, the more we learn and the more we see about different parts of ourselves and different parts of our cultures. And I think that's really important, that we're not leaving anyone behind. Though we appreciate everything that historical dress is doing, historical costuming has to be a little bit more loosey-goosey. Though the kind of person who is very interested in history and very interested in sewing is a little bit type A, myself included. A lot of us hold ourselves to very high standards of trying to reach historical accuracy, but sometimes it's just not viable. And that's something that we just need to release sometimes. If you can't save up for the correct materials, and if you can't take the time to learn everything perfectly from the get-go, allow yourself the grace to take it in bits and pieces and learn in steps and get as close as you can. If the only natural fibers that you can afford right now are thrifted bed sheets, it's still a natural fiber, and historically our ancestors would have used what was available to them and made do sometimes. That's the beauty of history and material culture, is that we get to see the ways in which people, sorry, I'm getting emotional. We get to see the ways in which people have made do throughout history. And that is a beautiful thing. Why am I feeling so emotional about this? Let's get into some tips for how to make sewing more affordable when you're getting your materials. So my first tip would be to use whatever you have and use whatever affordable options you can find. It really depends on the area, but in many places going to thrift stores, secondhand stores, estate sales, or even raiding your own closet is a great way to find more affordable fabrics. Anything made of fabric can be turned into something. Just think of the IKEA duvet covers that are turned into beautiful, fairly historically accurate gowns. There usually are in thrift stores some sections that have genuine fabric from a fabric store. This, for example, is 6 yards of cotton gingham fabric. It was only $4 at my local Goodwill. Some places the prices aren't as good as others. I've been to places where I've gotten incredible finds for $1 or $2, and then I've been to places that don't have anything for less than $10, which isn't going to be feasible for a lot of people. So you might have to get a little bit creative. In addition to thrift stores, some great places to find really affordable resources are estate sales. There's a lot of websites where you can look up what estate sales are going on in your area. Some of them have catalogs of what kind of equipment will be there. I've gotten a lot of my great sewing supplies from an estate sale that happened in a retirement community. There was a lady having an estate sale and she had a huge sewing collection that she wanted to get rid of. I got boxes full of notions of all sorts for $2 or $3. And it's very hit or miss. Some estate sales can be really expensive and not worth it. If you have the time to kind of bop around and check them out, they are a really great way to do it. Check out Facebook groups. There are a lot of groups called Buy Nothing groups that you have to search for in your local area. You can just put Buy Nothing and then your area into the Facebook group search, and usually you can find one or two. It'll probably be harder if you're in a rural area. I'm not sure if it's worldwide, but that is a great way where people, when they have something that they want to get rid of, or when they need something that they think someone else might have, they throw up a post and you can get in contact with people. So it can be a great way to get all sorts of sewing supplies, from fabric to notions to possibly even sergers or sewing machines, which are a huge expense. Another great resource is your local library. Now, not all libraries are going to be the best, but a lot of them have great resources and great programs that you might not expect. For example, our local library does 3D printing for free. They also have a library where you can check out things like GoPros for free. They may have books of patterns, or you may be able to talk to your librarian to request them. So make sure that you're checking out your local resources like libraries. If there are any sort of artistic resources in your area, there's an artist supply closet here in Sacramento called Broadroom. I'll put the link below if you feel like donating, or if you want to learn more about setting up an art supply collective. They have all sorts of supplies, including sewing supplies and fabrics. And also reach out to your local network of friends and family and there's all sorts of ways to collectively work together to be able to afford doing this hobby. My friend, for example, got her sewing machine from a friend who was giving it away while moving. And you see me sewing all the time, but I don't actually own a sewing machine. I'm borrowing it from my mom. Family and friends are a great way to get access to some sewing supplies you need. So there's all sorts of ways that we can work together to make this a more inclusive space and make it more accessible for everyone. And if you want a little how-to on finding fabric in thrift stores, as much as you can, get used to the feel of fabrics. Check out your closet and what you own. Touch polyester fabrics, touch cotton fabrics, touch anything that has a tag that you can tell the fiber content. As you go, you'll get a better feel for what something is based on how you touch it. Because a lot of times with thrifting, if it's not a curtain or a bed sheet, you might not have any idea what the fiber content is. So the more you can get used to feeling it out with your hands, or then afterwards learning how to do burn and bleach testing to check out fiber content, the more that will help you understand the fabric that you're able to get and work with. On my last trip to the thrift store, I was able to get this, which is a natural cotton, this, which is cotton, polyester, and rayon. It's only about 20% polyester, so I'm okay with that. And 100% cotton bedsheet, which is great for doing mock-ups or great for doing things like shirts, chemises. Get comfortable with using box dyes, because you can take a white bedsheet and turn it into all sorts of colors of fabric, and that way it's a really easy way to have a nice natural fiber that's dyed in whatever color you need. When you're thrifting or looking for fabrics, the entire bedding and homewares department is your friend. This, for example, is a curtain, this is a bed sheet, and this is a tablecloth. The most important thing with fabrics is that you understand the intent of what you're going to use it for, and even if it's not the exact fabric called for in the instructions, you want to find one that has enough similar qualities to do the same purpose, or at least find a way to make it function as it needs to. You don't need to have the exact fabrics that were used historically when you're starting out. It's absolutely a great way to learn about fabrics and history as you go along. Also, the dollar store is a wonderful place for a lot of sewing notions and crafting items. I've gotten everything from X-Acto knives to super glue to a really surprisingly good rotary cutter. They've got elastics for crafting, paints. I've found things like a costume fan, florals, ribbon, all things that are incredibly useful for cosplay, costuming, and sewing in general, you can find at the dollar store. And it's a great way to find a lot of the notions you need to be able to be playful and to make mistakes without feeling like it's a huge crushing weight, because notions can get really expensive. If you are going to go to Joann's, take advantage of their app. They have a lot of sales and they have a lot of special deals. They host pattern sales on a pretty frequent rotating basis. If you have the ability to pop in or keep an eye on social media to see when other people are posting about pattern sales, they usually do a 99-cent sale once a year, and then they frequently will drop the prices of patterns from $15 or $20 down to $1.99. And it does usually have a limit of 10 patterns per purchase, but I've gotten an incredible array of patterns during these sales that have made the price much more manageable. If you're just getting into historical costuming, sewing, or cosplay, a really great, easy, and affordable place to start is with the mass market patterns. Simplicity, Butterick, McCall's, they'll have a lot of great historically adjacent costumes, or costumes based on cosplays. It's a great way to get comfortable with how garments come together, what stitches are used, and generally they're more friendly for beginners. Once you get the hang of that, it's much more easy to jump towards your own pattern drafting if you're interested in that. Or if cost isn't an issue for you, there's great opportunity to support a bunch of the wonderful creators and business owners in this space. There are so many wonderful pattern makers. I'll link to a bunch of them down below. But also, if you don't have the means to support them, then you don't have to feel guilty about using mass market patterns. It's where a lot of people start, and there's tons of resources out there about how you can tweak them and tailor them and make them more historically accurate. A lot of times people in this community can get really hard on themselves about not using the most historically accurate patterns, or feel down because you don't understand how to pattern draft yet. But those are all skills that can be developed and things that you can save up for if it's something you really want to do. But if you just want to start, then jump in the easy end. Wait for a $1.99 pattern sale and start there. Also, the Mood Fabrics website has a ton of free patterns. It falls more in the modern general sewing category, but they do have a few cosplay outfits, and they're constantly coming out with new patterns. They just released a pattern for the Queen's Gambit. They've released one that's inspired by Bridgerton. They have a few different corset options, modern corsets. It's still fun. All of Mood's patterns are PDFs, so you will need to print them out. If you can't afford mass market patterns, or if you don't have the opportunity to print out Mood patterns and use those, there are so many projects that have tutorials on YouTube, especially for basics like chemises, shifts, simply simple items and garments that are basically just squares and rectangles based off measurements, so you can get started with those projects and you don't even need patterns. One of the comments I get the most is that people don't have their own dedicated sewing space and are surprised and delighted when I do most of my cutting and sewing on my bed. One of the things that will make that a lot easier is this gridded cardboard sheet made by Singer. It's meant to fold out and become a work surface. It makes the bed a lot easier to cut and sew on. It's better to cut with scissors. It doesn't do well with a rotary cutter because it is just cardboard, but this is between $5 to $10 to get. It's perfect if you need a small, easy to use, foldable work surface because it folds down into this small, manageable size. And also, I can suggest that you check out AliExpress. It's not the most sustainable option for the planet, but it is really affordable, so if you need sewing tools, they have some really inexpensive kits that you can get there that are pretty good. I'll link it below. Just know that that's a resource available to you if you do need some cost-effective products. If you are drafting your own patterns, be a little trash gremlin. A lot of people use old wrapping paper or saved up wrapping paper from Christmas. I blew through that pretty quickly, and now I've moved on to ironing the paper packaging that comes in our litter shipments from Chewy. It's actually kind of great butcher paper and it's free, so if you want to do this on the cheap and a little bit more sustainably, look at everything you own, everything you come in contact with, and think, can I incorporate this into one of my outfits? Can I use this for creation or pattern drafting? Could this be a useful supply at some point in my creative process? And if it is, and if you have the room, which I know is also a luxury, hang on to it if possible. I've attempted to make a Brugere hat out of an old placemat. I've had moderate success with the first go round, and I just thrifted a actual straw hat that I intend to take apart and turn into a Brugere hat. Be playful. There's all sort of creative ways to get your project started, and if you're looking for inspiration, there's so many wonderful and informative creators here on YouTube and on Instagram. Get engaged with the community, learn tips as you go along. Ultimately, all you need to sew is fabric, thread, a needle, scissors, and a heck of a lot of gumption, and maybe a creative idea. Even if you can't afford a sewing machine and you can't afford patterns, just know that you are being more historically accurate than everybody else by doing hand sewing and making it up as you go along. So I hope this has inspired you. I hope you take all of your fears and at least temporarily throw them out the window and charge joyfully into the abyss. Because part of the beauty of sewing is that if you completely mess up and get yourself in a very strange corner, as we all do at one point or another, there's a seam ripper to seam rip your way out of it. And if that's a disaster, you can patch or you can transform a terrible project into something completely different. That's the beauty of sewing. It is transformative. Use your power and transform something. Make something wonderful, make something terrible, make something terribly wonderful. Who cares? As long as you're making, that's all that matters. If this has been helpful, go ahead and like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share it with anyone who you think might find it useful. We have a wonderful sewing community that has grown so much. It's really inspiring to see everyone's work. I look forward to seeing all of your projects. You can always tag me. I'm at CCB Creative on Instagram, and I want to see all the stuff you guys are making. Thanks so much for watching, and in the meantime, keep making.